Hello again. As you know, I am Eli the Computer Guy over here for EliTheComputerGuy.com and EverymanIT.com. Today's class is hard drive maintenance. So your hard drive is an incredibly important component of your computer, whether it is your desktop PC or whether it is your enterprise class server. If your hard drive is not functioning properly or has not been taken care of very well, the rest of the computer is not going to run very well. I've seen a lot of problems with this out in the real world where real high-level technicians don't pay attention to the hard drive. And then everybody wonders why the server or the computer then crashes. So this class, these are some very simple concepts I'm going to go over with you. But again, like I say, I've seen middle level and senior level technicians not pay attention to these hard drive issues. And then the server crashes and then everything goes really badly. So this class is mainly going to pertain to Windows computers. So we're going to be talking about what you should do if you have a Windows XP machine, a Vista machine, a 7 machine, but also servers. The basic concepts for your hard drive relate to servers just the way they do to desktop operating systems. I've seen servers crash for the same reasons that the desktop computers crash. So if you understand these basic concepts, you'll do very well, and I swear if you're out there in the real world, you will see these problems, and if you know what to do, everything will be a really easy, quick fix. And if you don't know what to do, it can be hellishly horrible, because if your hard drive is what's causing problems for your computer, it can just be evil. It can be a really evil problem with your system. So with that, give me a second and we're going to dive into this class, hard drive maintenance. So the first thing that we need to talk about when we're talking about hard drive maintenance is S.M.A.R.T. S.M.A.R.T is an acronym. It's called Self-Monitoring, Analysis, and Reporting. Basically, all modern hard drives have a little computer gizmo on them in order to do self-diagnostics. They do things like they check the temperature, the current temperature of the drive. They look for errors. They look for problems. Basically, S.M.A.R.T is there to try to detect problems with the hard drive before the hard drive fails. So S.M.A.R.T is trying to detect to see when your hard drive is going to fail. This is very important. We used to get a lot of customers coming into the shop, and when their computer would boot up, they would get this S.M.A.R.T error, and then it would say press enter to continue. Well, what that S.M.A.R.T error meant was that the motherboard was getting an error from the hard drive, and the hard drive was saying, I'm going to die soon. So basically, whatever the S.M.A.R.T error was, it could tell that that hard drive was going to die. Now, it's very important to understand with hard drives is that you can't really fix them if they are getting S.M.A.R.T errors. S.M.A.R.T errors mean that the hard drive is having physical hardware problems. So maybe the little motor that spins the cylinder, the platters in there isn't spinning correctly. Maybe the arm isn't moving correctly. Basically, there's some kind of hardware error on that hard drive. Now, with hard drives, you can't really fix hardware errors. Technically, you can, but you need a NASA-grade clean room, and it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of dollars to fix, you know, a 200 gig hard drive. So the parts within a hard drive can technically be repaired, but you don't want to do it, and you probably don't have the ability to do it. So if you're getting a S.M.A.R.T error, what that means is that the hard drive will die. It's just like if you go to the doctor and the doctor gives you the prognosis that you have 3 months to live. You know, you may only live 3 weeks, or hell, you might live 6 months. But the fact of the matter is, you're not going to be living that long. When you get that prognosis, you then don't live off into old age. And that's the important thing to remember with S.M.A.R.T. If you start getting S.M.A.R.T errors for your hard drive, it's not saying your hard drive is going to die today. It's not saying your hard drive is going to die tomorrow. What it's saying is that your hard drive is dying. So what is very important, if you get a SMART error for your hard drive on your computer, you need to pull that hard drive out, you need to put it into a disk duplicator, and you need to copy all the information over to another stable hard drive. You need to do a data recovery as soon as you see that error happen. Because if you're getting that error, you most likely can still access the hard drive, so you still many times will be able to pull the data off. You just don't know how long it will live. Now with the S.M.A.R.T, there's a lot of software out there that can read what is going on with the S.M.A.R.T on the hard drive. So as I was saying, many of the motherboards can communicate with the hard drive, and if the hard drive is giving S.M.A.R.T errors, literally on boot up, you know, when you're getting those BIOS screens, it will error out and it will say S.M.A.R.T error. Do you want to continue? Yes, no. I would say no. Stop everything, pull the hard drive out, duplicate it right then and there. Because literally, if you're getting a S.M.A.R.T error, hard drive might last 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 minutes. You don't know, so you might as well do the data recovery right then and there. But not only that, as I'll show you with one of the pieces of software we're going to use today called Defragler, there is software, once the computer boots up, you can install on your computer, and then it can read the S.M.A.R.T on your hard drive and tell you what's going on. So it can tell you the current temperature of the hard drive, it can tell you how many times the hard drive has been booted, it can tell you a whole bunch of wacky information. That is something important to understand if you ever go into data recovery, is many of the manufacturers of these hard drives have software that is built to talk to the S.M.A.R.T on the hard drive, and sometimes that software is able to futz with that S.M.A.R.T and you're able to do some data recovery. So the big thing whenever you're dealing with hard drive maintenance is to realize that there is S.M.A.R.T on hard drives. This is a component of the hard drive. You know, it takes temperature settings, all kinds of information it pulls in. If you get a S.M.A.R.T error, your hard drive is going to die. So pull it out, duplicate it right then and there, very important. And then also, if you just want to keep an eye on your hard drive, you can install software on your computer that will be able to read that S.M.A.R.T. You know, just as you go, and will be able to tell you things like temperature and how well the hard drive is doing. But that is S.M.A.R.T, and that's one of the big concepts you're going to have to understand. Now the next concept that you're going to need to understand is defragmenting your hard drive. Now, please, listen to me. Listen to me. Defragmenting your hard drive is a relatively useful thing to do, but it's not that important. So back in the day, back 15 years ago, when I first started using, you know, Windows computers, when I started maintaining them, back with Windows 95 and Windows 98, defragmenting was a big deal. If you did not defragment your hard drive back in the era of Windows 98, you had major problems. We are now 14 years later. We are now 2012 when I'm recording this video. Defragmenting your hard drive now is useful. It will give you a little bit of performance boost, but it's not that big a deal. So I want to talk about it today because you should do it every once in a while. It is useful to do, but don't think it is a huge thing that you really have to worry about. I've seen so many people think defragmenting your hard drive is like the biggest thing in the world, and let me tell you, it really not so much. Back in the Windows 98 days, it was a huge deal. Now, it is not. So what are we talking about when we're talking about defragmenting the hard drive? Well, imagine that this line here is your hard drive. So your hard drive has lots and lots and lots of little sectors on it. Now, when you're at your computer and you save a file, your computer is going to go to the first free sectors on your hard drive and store your file there. So let's say you store file 1 here. You know, let's say the movie file. And then you want to store a document. So you store document here. And then you want to store some music. And so you store the music here. So we've stored these 3 files and they're all in order. Well, what happens is, let's say you decide to delete this Word document. All that the operating system does on your hard drive is it literally just deletes that one file and doesn't do anything else with these other files. So then as you're going, you create some more files, 5, 6, 7, and then you go back and you delete 6. Well, the computer works fastest when all these files are clustered together in one section of the hard drive. What fragmenting your hard drive is when you start getting these gaps in the hard drive. So file 1's here, file 4's here. Basically, they're spread out all over the place. What happens when you defragment your hard drive is the defragmentation software moves all the files that you have into one contiguous block. So if we've created this gap here, so this is a fragmented hard drive, if we've created this gap here, what the defragmenting software will do is it will then move the 3 file right next to the 1 file. And then we'll move the 4 file right next to the 3, and then it will move the 7 file right next to the 4. Now this is a non-fragmented hard drive. So before, these were spread out all over the place. Now they're right here in one nice block. For the computer, this means the computer will be able to run a lot faster. It will be able to read the hard drive a lot more quickly. Now, by doing this, you can get a little bit of performance boost. But remember, operating systems have come a long way since Windows 98. And so they're kind of built now to not really have to worry a lot about these fragmented hard drives. So back in the day, when you're dealing with Windows 98, Windows 95, old hard drives, having this fragmentation was a huge deal. It really did slow down your computer. Nowadays, we're dealing with very fast hard drives. We're dealing with very good operating systems. The fragmentation still slows your computer down. It's just not so significant. Why I'm going to keep emphasizing that it's not so significant is because in order to do this defragmenting process, back in the old days, if you had a 10 gig hard drive, that would probably take you half an hour. That's not too bad, right? So if you said you could get a little bit of performance boost for doing a process that takes half an hour, who wouldn't do that? But here's the thing. We are now in the age of 1 terabyte hard drives, 2 terabyte hard drives, 3 terabyte hard drives. So if it takes half an hour to do 10 gigs, it's going to take 300 minutes to do 100 gigs and 3,000 minutes to do a 1 terabyte hard drive. So the issue that I run into is you kind of have to choose the lesser of two evils. If you defragment your hard drive, yes, you're going to get a bit of a performance boost, but do you really want to have your computer defragmenting a hard drive for 24 hours or maybe longer? This was one of the problems we ran into with my computer shop is all my employees, again, they were all fixated on this defragmenting crap. And so they'd always try to defragment the client's hard drives. And then the computer would literally sit on the bench for 24 or 48 hours simply doing the defragmentation process. So you really have to weigh how much you care about this. Again, if you're using an old operating system for some reason, because again, when you go out into the real world, Windows 98 still exists. Windows NT 4.0 is still out there, still performing functions. So if you run into one of those systems, you really do want to defragment that hard drive, because if you're dealing with NT 4.0, if you're dealing with Windows 98, 95, etc., they're not able to cope with this fragmentation very well, so you do want to defragment those hard drives. But if you're dealing with Windows XP, 2003 Server, 2008 Server, 7, Vista, etc., it's not so significant with that. So that's one of the things. So that's what fragmentation and defragmenting is. You're going to have to decide whether you want to do it. Again, like I say, real world, I think it's far more painful to defragment hard drives than to leave the fragmentation as it is. So we've talked about the S.M.A.R.T technology that's built onto the hard drives, and we've talked about defragmenting your hard drive. So with that, I want to go and do a demonstration on my computer to show you a little bit about how this works. Now, one of the warnings that I will give you if you decide to defragment your hard drive is the first thing is never use the built-in defragmenter that Windows gives you. That has been a piece of crap piece of software since Windows 95. Even up to Windows Server 2008, it's still garbage software. Whenever the defragmenter runs into a problem, it just drops out and it stops defragmenting the hard drive. It's slow, it's tedious, it's finicky, it's horrible. What I would say is when I do defragment hard drives, I use a piece of software called Defragler. That's what I'm going to show you today. It is the complete opposite of the Windows disk defragmenter. It's relatively fast, it's relatively painless, it's relatively robust, and it's free to use, at least right now in 2012. So that's one warning I will give you before we go into this demonstration. I'm going to use this piece of software called Defragler. I would suggest you use that. You can use other software to do this. Whatever you do, don't use the built-in Windows defragmenter. It's just horrible and evil. It really is. So with that, let's go onto the computer and I'm going to show you the defragmenting, and then also in Defragler I'll show you how it reads the S.M.A.R.T on the hard drive and gives you some, at least some curious information. So here we are again, back at my Windows 7 computer. So the first thing I want to show you is I'm going to be using the software called Defragler, D-E-F-R-A-G-G-L-E-R, for disk defragmentation. There are, again, like I say, a lot of different pieces of software you can use for defragmenting. This is the one I prefer. It's completely free, and it's, like I say, a hell of a lot better than what Windows gives you. But basically all you do is go to puriform.com/defragler, and you can download it here. You download it, you install it, and then you get this screen. So this is Defragler. It shows you the different drives on your computer, and then you can see the status of them. So I've got my C drive, my D drive, and my F drive on this computer. So all these different little colored blocks here, this is all the fragmentation, right? So you can see there's blue and red, etc. If you look, this particular drive, my video drive, my F drive, is 35% fragmented. So 35% fragmentation. You can see there's a lot of fragmentation here, a lot of different colors. Well, if you go to my backup drive, so my backup drive, all that happens here is basically Windows backs up and creates a backup file on this particular drive every night. So I don't do a lot with it. So you see how little fragmentation is on this drive because Windows just creates that backup file and doesn't do anything else with it. So this has 6% fragmentation. If we go to my C drive, you'll see it's also fragmented. All you have to do, if you want to see how your hard drive is doing, is you go down to this little button here that says Analyze. And if you scan, you do the analyze, it will scan your hard drive and see how fragmented it is. This is an SSD hard drive, so this is pretty quick, and so it comes back again with a 35% fragmentation. From here, you can then go down and click this defrag button, and they have the defrag and the quick defrag. So obviously quick defrag will be a lot faster than defrag, but if I wanted to defragment this hard drive right now, all I would do is click that button. There's nothing fancy to see. You click the button and then you go off and you have lunch, or you go to sleep, or you go on a vacation. It'll take a little while. This particular hard drive, like I say, is only 74 gigs, but as you can see, my other two hard drives are 2 terabytes each. So if I wanted to defragment them, it would take a while. As I was saying before about the S.M.A.R.T function on the hard drive, so this is the intelligence on the hard drive.
The nice part with Defragler is you can go and you can actually see the health of your hard drive. So you click the hard drive you want to see, and then you can click this little health tab, and it will show you a bunch of information about your hard drive. This all comes from that S.M.A.R.T that I was talking about. The main thing that you want to see, really the only thing that you care about, that I care about, is where it says health equals good. As long as it says good, you're pretty much good. There's not a whole lot more to worry about. And if it says bad, well, then you swap the hard drive out and copy the data very quick. But this does show you some information about your hard drive that might be useful at some point. It shows you the temperature that it's operating at. So this is 40 degrees Celsius. Yeah, I've been looking at it. Mine normally runs at 40 to 41. So you could go here, and if you have hard drives that keep failing in your computer, it might be because your computer doesn't have enough ventilation. So you could go in here and you could see how hot your hard drives are. If this was 50 degrees or 60 degrees Celsius, you might find that your hard drive is just running too hot and you need to put more ventilation into your computer. Then you can go down, you just see the device description, firmware, interface, transfer mode, all this kind of stuff. They've got some interesting things over here. Power on hours, so how many hours this hard drive has been powered on its life. So this has been powered on 156 days and 19 hours. Again, it's curious, take a look at it. I don't really know what you would do with that, but it gives you a lot of this information, and this all comes from the S.M.A.R.T. The big thing to realize here is not necessarily this information doesn't matter a whole lot to you, but the point is that the S.M.A.R.T is collecting all of this information. So if some of these values hit certain thresholds, that's where you'll get that error when you try to boot the computer, and it will give you a S.M.A.R.T error saying basically your hard drive is about to die. But this is all there is to Defragler. Again, you just select your hard drive, you do analyze. If you want to defragment it, you defragment it, and then you can also go and you can see the health. This is where it'll show you all the information from S.M.A.R.T. So that's Defragler, and that's defragmenting for you. So let's go back out to the real world and we'll talk about hard drive capacity.
So now that you understand S.M.A.R.T and you understand defragmenting, the next thing that we need to talk about is the hard drive capacity, or more importantly, the partition capacity on your computer. So these are the drives that you see whenever you go into My Computer. So let's say you have a hard drive on your computer, so it's one 1 terabyte hard drive. Then you can divide that 1 terabyte hard drive into numerous partitions. So you can do the C partition, the D partition, the E partition, the F partition. You do 4 partitions generally. So that would be the C drive, the D drive, the F drive, the G drive, etc. Well, the important thing to understand is that if your system partition doesn't have enough space on it, you can start to have major problems with the operating system. The operating system itself will start to have major issues. So the first thing to realize is that in general, your system partition, your C drive, should have at least 10% of its space free. So if it's a 20 gig partition, 2 gigs should be free. If it's a 100 gig partition, 10 gigs should be free. If it's a terabyte partition, 100 gigs should be free. So that is for optimal performance. At the very least, 1 gig needs to be free in order to make sure the operating system functions properly. If less than 1 gig is free, your operating system can crash and you can start to have some severe major issues. Now, why is this, you're asking? Well, the reason is because when the operating system is running, when the Windows operating system is fully functional, it is continuously creating temporary files and then deleting those temporary files. Usually this is done invisibly. So when you open up a Word document, not only do you have the Word document, but you have a temporary version of that Word document open at the exact same time. It's simply how Windows functions. If you have less than 1 gig of space free on your system partition, these processes are not able to work properly and your computer can literally crash, and it's horrible and nasty. Everything can come to a grinding halt. So you need to have at least 1 gig of space free on your system partition, your C drive, in order for Windows to function properly. This is true of Windows XP, Vista 7 or 2003 server, 2008 server, etc. Whether you have server or desktop, you need at least 1 gig of space free. Now, why you should have 10% of your partition free is so that your computer can create what are called shadow copies. So if you decide to install backup software, or if you decide to use backup software to back up your computer, what you should realize is that your computer can never copy a file that is currently in use. So if you have a Word document that is open and you're looking at it, the operating system cannot copy that Word document over to the backup software. If you have a PST file open with Outlook, if that PST file is currently open, the operating system cannot copy it. If you have a Windows Exchange server and the email data store is currently being used, that data store cannot be copied over to the backup software, over to your backup. What Windows does then is it creates what are called shadow copies. So if the PST file is currently open, the operating system is able to create a shadow copy of that PST file, and then the backup software is then able to back up that shadow copy so that the file gets backed up. So any open files on your computer, a shadow copy is created, and then the backup software is able to then copy that shadow copy into the backup that it is creating. The big thing with these shadow copies is that they are essentially identical to the original. So if you have a 10 gig PST file, the shadow copy is a 10 gig file. So, you know, if you don't have enough room to create that shadow copy, then the backup routine will fail. This becomes very important, especially when you start dealing with servers, you start dealing with really large files. If there's not enough room to create these shadow copies, the backup will fail. And if you're not paying attention to the backup logs, you know, you may have a backup system that's not running right for months or weeks or years, etc. So it's very important that at least 10% of your hard disk or your partition on your hard disk is free. 10% is so that you can create copies of the files. 1 gig is just so that the operating system can do what the operating system does. Again, I've seen this with real production enterprise servers. I've seen them crash because the C drive gets below 1 gig in space. Now you may be thinking, why would the C drive get that low in space? There's a number of reasons this can happen. The first reason is because there's a lot of technicians out there that are still under the old concept of when they create a server, they create different partitions for what that server is going to do. So with me, when I create servers, when I build servers, I now create one partition. It's just one big partition. A lot of people still are under the old school idea that when you create a server, that on a hard drive, you should create a system partition. And then you should create a database partition. Then you should create a program file partition. And then you should create the Exchange server partition. So they'll have 4 partitions on one hard drive. The issue is a lot of times when people are doing this, they make the system partition way too small. So it may be a 500 gig hard drive on the server, but the system partition, the C drive, is only 20 gigs in size. Well, the issue is, you install the Windows Server operating system, you install some software, you get some log files going, etc. You can go from having 20 gigs of free space down to 2 gigs of free space really, really quickly. So, you know, when you go and you just build out a normal server, you're going to use a lot of hard drive space. It's nothing to use 15 or 20 gigs of space simply on a brand new server that no information has been put into yet. So the problem is that they make that system partition way too small, and then when log files are created, or when people install software, or any of the other nuttiness that happens with servers happens, that then keeps using up all the hard drive space, And now that 20 gig partition now only has 500 megs of space left on it, and then your server starts acting all wacky. I've seen this time and time and time and time again. Now sometimes all that hard drive space can be used just because the administrator isn't thinking about what they're doing. You know, they keep installing software onto the system partition, they copy files onto the system partition, things like that. Other times I've seen where log files will end up crashing the server. So I saw this once, really, it was, I don't know, because it was back in the NT days, but it was like a 6 gig worth of log files. So we had a server at the place that I was working. You know, it crashed one day. I went in trying to figure out what was going on, found out it only had 400 megs of hard drive space left, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on because the server basically was an NT server that had been built, it had been turned on, and then that's all you did with it. I mean, you rebooted it every once in a while, but you didn't really do too much to it. Well, the reason is because there was a piece of software that was running on that server that like every second created a little log text file. So it was nothing. It would create a simple text file, .txt file, with a little bit of information, and then copy that into a folder. Right? The software did it. No big deal. It wasn't even a kilobyte in size. We're talking about bytes in size for these individual log files. Well, the issue is it was creating those day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, for years. And so all those little text files ended up creating like 6 gigs of log file that nobody cared about that ended up crashing the server. So that's one of the ways that this can happen, and it really does. It crashes servers in the real world. An issue that happened up with my computer that I use for creating these videos. I built about 2 years ago an ultra fast computer, you know, i7 processor. I bought a $500 80 gig solid state hard drive, right? Well, one of the issues that I was running into is the computer kept slowing down and crashing because the Adobe Premiere software that I use to create these video files creates lots and lots and lots of cache or temporary files. And by creating all those cache and temporary files, it ended up continuously crashing my computer. The hard part about it was Adobe Premiere doesn't tell you about this anywhere. I had to do a Google search to figure out what the hell was going on. And what I found was buried way, way down in the file structure, there was this cache of files that Adobe creates, and then I had to delete it every once in a while so that my computer will function properly. So again, this is in the real world, you know, whether it's log files in the server or whether it's temporary files cached on a desktop computer, a lot of times software will create files on your computer and you don't realize that it's happening. You don't even realize where the files are getting stored. And if you get too much of that on your computer, again, below 10 gigs of space, your backup software may not work properly. You might start to get some weird issues. If you go below 1 gig of space on your C drive, your system partition, your computer will not function properly. It'll start acting all wacky, weird, and horrible and evil. And it's just a really bad thing. So make sure that you've gotta keep enough space on that hard drive. Now the big thing, we're talking about, you know, your system drive getting all full and gunked up with all these files. The big problem is figuring out what is taking up all the room on your hard drive. Windows, again, I don't understand why, 2012, Windows 7, it doesn't really have a very good built-in way of figuring out what folders, the size of the folder. So you can't just go in and very easily see how big folders are and figure out where all the data is being stored. You can right click and do properties, but then it takes like 3 minutes as it scrolls through and counts up, and it's really tedious. I found a piece of software that I use called Folder Size. Again, it's completely free to use. It scans your computer, figures out how big all your folders and files are, and then you can navigate through and delete the files and folders that you don't need, or figure out what's taking up all the space and then do a Google search to figure out, what's going on. Back in the old XP days, there used to be an add-on that you could add to XP that allowed you to see the size of folders basically in the normal folder view. Again, I don't know why, but with Vista and Windows 7, you can't do that. That little add-on doesn't work anymore. I wish there was some kind of dynamic way to see the size of your files and folders, but unfortunately in Windows 7 and 2008 server you can't. You have to install all this folder size software, and then you have to run scan, and then you have to wait 5 minutes and see what it tells you. But it is very useful, it's very free, and again, like I say, if your computer's crashing, your server's crashing, well, you got to figure out where all the space is getting taken up. So with that, I want to take you onto the computer, just show you how this folder size works, because it is an invaluable tool, and it really has saved my butt a lot of times.
So here we are back at my Windows 7 computer. In order to download this piece of software I'll be using called Folder Size, you simply go to www.mindgems.com/products/folder-size/folder-size.html, or you go to mindgems.com and just navigate through the products until you find Folder Size. This is a freeware product, so you can download it and use it as well. So all you do is you download it and you install it and you use it. It's all a pretty simple process to install. Once you've installed it, all you have to do is double click on the icon here, and then you will get this screen. So unfortunately, this does not scan your hard drive dynamically. So this will not continuously update. You have to do a manual scan every time you want to see what's taking up all the space on your hard drive. It's a really simple process though. All I have to do is come down, select the hard drive I want to take a look at. So I want to look at the C drive. And then I want to go up here and click the Scan Selected Drive button. So this is going to go through and it is going to scan all the files and folders in your computer and then show you how much space they take up. So you can see the C drive now, it's slowly ticking up. And you can see all these different folders in here. So we're going to do one of those whole little time skips into the future because this is going to take 8 to 10 minutes. Again, unfortunately, it takes this long, but it just does. So you've just got to hit the scan button and go get a cup of coffee like I'm going to be doing now. So I'll see you in a minute when the scan is finished. And so about 8 to 10 minutes later, the scan is finally complete. So it has gone through and it's scanned the entire hard drive, and it now shows me what folders have the most data in them. If you go over here, you get a nice little bar chart with little floaty pie things showing you, like the users folder contains 17.85% of all the data on the hard drive, documents and settings, Windows, etc. So from here, I can simply go in and I can start trying to figure out what folder has the most stuff in it. So if I scroll down, I can see that the users folder has 16.6 gigs of data. So I can just click on that, and then over here I can see what's taking up all the data. So user is the user account, so that has about 13 gigs. That seems pretty normal. But then look at this, all users is using 3.3 gigs. I wonder why that is. So I can click on all users, and then I can see what's using up space here. So I can see that, let's see, Microsoft is using up 1.8 gigs. And then I can go in and I can see like this Microsoft anti-malware is taking up 1.1 gigs of space. I mean, why is that? What is that? It has quarantine files in here. So I can go in, and so this must have been one of the old pieces of software that I installed, and for some reason it still has data here. So if I want to get rid of this quarantine file, I can simply right click and I can delete. And so now I've deleted that folder from my hard drive. So if I have, like I say, an old computer, has less than a gig of free space left, freeing up 500 megs might be a lot of room. So with that, I can go back, I can take a look, let's see what's going on. The Windows folder is using 28.5 gigs of space. So I can highlight that. I can go in, sort by size, and try to figure out what's going on. So when SXS is using 12.827, but this installer folder is using 5.4 gigs of space. So I can go in here and I can take a look at what's going on. I did a Google search on this particular folder before, and although I do need to keep it, I can move it off my hard drive while I don't need it, and then move it back on if I ever need to uninstall software. But basically, this is just how this folder size works. From here, I can go in, I can look at the MSO cache, like this is using 686 megs, and you would be surprised how much data is just stored all over the place willy-nilly on your hard drive, and unless you have a piece of software like folder size here, it would be almost impossible to find. Again, when I was using Adobe Premiere, it was clogging up my hard drive. I couldn't figure out what was going on. I used folder size to navigate all the way down, and again, Adobe had this cache file all the way in the back of nowhere. They didn't talk about it. They didn't tell me I had to clean it out. It didn't automatically clean itself out. So I had to use this to go in and then manually just clean all the cache, all the temporary files, because it was literally, when I went in there, it was using like 30 gigs of space. And I didn't even know it was doing that. So that's all there is to folder size. This is all you have to do to clean out. Remember, you should have 10% of your hard drive free for your computer to run well, or at least 1 gig in order for it to function. If you go below 1 gig of free space on your system drive, your C drive, all kinds of horrible, nasty things will happen. So with that, let's go back out to the real world for some final thoughts.
So that is a class on hard drive maintenance. If you understand these few concepts, your life is going to be a lot easier. I mean, these are the simple things that you run into in the real world. You run out there and you study all about Active Directory, and you study about all this hacking and virus and high-level stuff, and then your server ends up crashing because some little piece of software is just creating a mountain of log files. I mean, that's really, it's how it works in the real world. I've seen so many problems with servers simply because the idiot technician that installed the server only created a system partition of 20 gigs. There's a 500 gig hard drive, and out of that they only give 20 gigs to the operating system. It's just dumb. It's ridiculous. It's not that they don't understand Active Directory and they don't understand all the MCSE stuff. It's just they gave a 20 gig partition. This really does happen in the real world. So we talked about S.M.A.R.T. That's self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting that's built onto all modern hard drives. Again, what S.M.A.R.T. does, essentially, why it's useful, is it tells you when it thinks that the hard drive is going to die. So if it sees that the hard drive is having problems, it will tell you, and right then and there you should pull the hard drive out of the system and do a disk duplication. Again, you can't really fix hard drives. Technically you can, but you need a $20,000 clean room, and you're not going to do it. So if you see a S.M.A.R.T. error, that hard drive is dead. Copy the data now. You don't know if it's going to die in 3 weeks, 3 days, or 3 hours. You really, really, really don't. We talked about defragmenting. I showed you here. Back in the old days, again, Windows 95, Windows 98, NT 4.0, defragmenting was a huge issue. These were old operating systems using old hard drives. Nowadays, we're using Windows 7. We're using really fast modern hard drive. It's not that big a deal. Defragmenting isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't tell people not to worry about defragmenting. Not because it's not slightly useful, it is slightly useful, but because it now takes so long to do. Remember, back in the days, Windows 95, Windows 98, Windows NT, we had 10 gig hard drives, 20 gig hard drives. In order to defragment one of those hard drives, you're talking about 30 minutes or an hour. We now have terabyte hard drives, 2 terabyte hard drives, 3 terabyte hard drives, And the fact is, the defragmenting process is not much faster than it used to be. So if you want to defragment a 1 terabyte hard drive, that may take you 24 hours or more. And so what I tell most people is the performance boost you are going to get from defragmenting your hard drive is probably not worth the time you're going to put into it, especially if you're dealing with a computer repair shop or you are a technician in an enterprise environment, you're an employee. Don't do defragmenting. It's just going to piss everybody off because it takes a long time to do and it doesn't really help performance. You know, if you go to the CEO's office and you take his computer away for a day simply to defragment the hard drive and then you give it back to him and it's not noticeably faster, he's not going to be a happy camper. I mean, it's just how it is. If you do decide to do the defragmenting, and again, it's not a bad thing. I just think it's a waste of time. The big thing is don't use the defragmentation software that is built into Windows. Use Defragler or another piece of software like that. Again, what's built into Windows is still quirky, it's still slow, it still fails. It's just horrible. Defragler, other defragmenting software like that is robust, it's quicker, it's not quick, it's quicker, and it will just make you a lot happier. If you use Defragler by Piriform, it's completely free, and they have different versions, but they have the free version, so just use that. Finally, we talked about your hard drive capacity, more importantly, your partition capacity. More importantly than that, the system partition capacity. So you can have a 500 gig hard drive, but if you create a C partition that's only 20 gigs, you can run into real problems. I see this again and again and again in the real world. If you go under 10% of your partition space, free space, your backup software, you can start running into random problems. I talked about that whole shadow copy routine. If you go below 1 gig of space, you will start to have major issues where the operating system will crash, software will crash, you'll just get all kinds of buggy problems, the computer will be slow as hell, it will just be absolutely and utterly horrible. So try to never go below 1 gig in free space on your hard drive ever, and then try to keep it above 10% free just to make sure your computer functions properly. Now, one of the issues that you're going to get into is if you walk in to an environment where somebody did create a system partition that was way too small, you can use software that will resize the partition. So we'll talk about that probably in another class. It's not too complicated, but basically you can use a software and it will resize the partition for you. Now, if you're using just normal, a desktop computer, Windows 7, Windows XP, Vista, the software to do this isn't too expensive. Probably about $50, which is well worth it because if you figure, you know, you're billing out at $100 an hour, $50 for a piece of software that will allow you to do the work in 20 minutes isn't that bad a deal. The problem that you will run into is that if you buy the same software for servers, so 2008 server, 2003 server, etc., it's probably going to cost you about $600. So this is going to be a whole big horrible argument that you're going to have to get into with your boss or with your client. But paying the $600 in order to resize the partition on a server computer is well worth it. It really is at the end of the day. You know, if you try to save money doing something else, not buying the software, it's probably going to go bad for you. The warning that I will give you with it, this file, this software that resizes partitions, is I know a lot of the higher level geeks out there, you Linux geeks, there's a lot of free software out there that will resize partitions for you. And it's absolutely free as long as you know what you're doing. The issue is, I'm imagining if you're watching this class, you probably don't know what you're doing. You're not a Linux guru. You're probably not even a Windows guru yet. You're probably just trucking along trying to figure out why the hell your server just crashed. And so the issue is that the free software that's out there to resize partitions can be quirky, can do damage, and if you do something dumb, you can destroy the entire partition and file system and everything else. So I would suggest for the average person, the average user, if you need to resize one of your partitions, just go out, buy the software. Even if you have to go out and buy the $600 version, remember, if you're dealing with a server, these servers, 20 people, 100 people, 1,000 people rely on that server being up and running. If you try to save $600, by trying to be cheap and trying to be cute, and you crash that server, you kill that server, it's not one server that you've damaged. It's 20 people, it's 100 people, it's 1,000 people that all relied on that server to do whatever it is they needed to get done. So, again, I always tell you, I generally tell you, go out, buy the retail software. Most of the time it will do you better. If you ever have to resize a partition, I use Acronis Disk Manager, or Disk Management, one of those. They have a normal desktop version, they have a server version. It gets a little expensive, but it's well worth it. But that's, this class, hard drive maintenance. We've talked about SMART, we've talked about defragmenting, we've talked about hard drive capacity, partition capacity. These are all very important concepts that a lot of high-level technicians completely forget about. And these things, like I say, the partition capacity, I've seen it crash computers again and again and again and again. So with that, I'm Eli the Computer Guy over here for EliTheComputerGuy.com and EverymanIT.com. This class was hard drive maintenance. I enjoyed teaching it, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.